And finally, simultaneous contrast. Again, this is the 7th color contrast. And here's really where we get into what Albers is doing with all of his color illusion exercises. But we can look at this very clearly. So I'll ask you to cover up the bottom composition where we have the green and the brown with your hand, and just look at the top where we're seeing the yellow and the purple. And look at that dot that's right above the center. Focus on that, and you'll notice how those two squares that are surrounded by colors. So on the left side, we have the square surrounded by yellow. On the right side, we have the square surrounded by purple. And you're looking at that dot right in the middle at the top. And notice how those squares are changing colors. The square on the left against the yellow looks purple. The square on the right against the purple looks yellow. So some people say that's our eyes getting fatigued. Some people say it's actually our eyes becoming more sensitized, more articulate. You can do the same thing with the bottom, cover up the top composition, just look at the green and the brown composition, stare at that dot, and you'll see how the inset color on the left against the green looks brown. The inset color on the right against the brown looks green. So in a sense, we're making 3 colors look like 2. We're making the same color simultaneously look like 2 different colors. That's what we call simultaneous contrast. So just to review, 7 color contrast: contrast of hue, contrast of value, contrast of saturation, complementary contrast, contrast of temperature, contrast of extension, and simultaneous contrast. Now let's switch to Illustrator. You'll note that there are a number of downloadable grids, and each of these grids is made up out of a certain number of squares. Here we have a 5x5 grid. Here's a 6x6 grid, a 7x7 grid, an 8x8 grid, and a 9x9 grid. Let's go back to the 5x5 grid. And what we're going to do with these grids is experiment with the 7 color contrast, just to think about possibilities of what we can do. And you can try working with asymmetrically or symmetrically, creating patterns, creating compositions that have no patterns, being very deliberate, very systematic, or being very spontaneous. So let's experiment with contrast of hue. And as I click on these squares, if I press on the Shift key and go over to my eyedropper, I can actually sample colors. I can click on squares and hold down the Shift key, sample colors that way, add colors. And as you can see, in this case, I'm building a composition just based on the primary colors. That's where I'll start. So red, yellow, and blue. And I'll keep building. And this is a very symmetrical composition. Maybe put some reds out in the corners. In this case, I'm going to go again with the red. There we go. That really changes things dramatically, doesn't it? Now I'm just going to go in and take out those blacks, transform them into something else. Maybe we'll try blue and just see what happens. And the last thing I'm going to do is take off these white outlines. Which again, if I just select all of the squares, I can go up here to my palette, take out the white outlines. So now it's solid colors. It's very beautiful. So a very strong central focus. I could try changing this to the yellow. Something like that. Very symmetrical composition, very much based on a pattern. And you can try the same thing with one of the other grids, but I'm going to keep going on. So a 6x6 grid, let's try contrast of value with this light and dark. I'm going to create what I call a blend. So at the very bottom of this grid, let's go a little bit bigger. I'm going to create a box, a rectangle. Turn off that outline. And what I want to do here is create a gradient. There it is. And now I'm going to assign a hue to each side of this gradient. So that box down there is selected. If I click on this, you see a black and white gradient. And what I want to do now is just say, try working with red. Actually, I'll try working with one of the secondary colors. I'll say orange. Click in the center. Drag that down. Okay. So there I have a blend of orange that goes from black to white. Very simple. If I want to change the parent color from orange to something else, I'll just go down and select this again. Make sure that center is selected. Go up to my eyedropper. And in this case, let's just go down to say blue-green. Drag, there we go. So now I've got a gradient of blue-green from very light to very dark. And again, if you look at the gradient at the bottom, I can work with that. Let's go back to that orange. There we go. So from this gradient, I can sample colors. And this is a really good way just to think about working with value. So this is a 6x6 grid. And I'm going to work a little bit more randomly here, where I just go in and sample colors. And if I hold down the Shift key and with my eyedropper, I can go in and just randomly sample colors. And again, here I'm just going to play. It's probably the purest orange right there, right from the middle. There's something very dark. Look at that beautiful brown you get. I always want a little bit of contrast. And when I'm doing this, I'm just exploring all the possible variants of different values of this orange. I'm just playing. I'm not really even concerned with a real clear composition at this point. I can always go back and change my colors later. But just as a basic, say, compositional strategy, I'll say I'm going to have light squares on the left side and progressively darker squares on the right side. And again, I'm going to go back and turn off my grid lines. Very easy to do up here in the palette. Now, some things I want to change. There's a little bit too much contrast here, so I'll go back and sample another variant of light and dark. Still have the outline checked. Bring that forward. Again, up here, I'm just going to try to come into this and sample a little bit darker. Always looking at this. So that's actually kind of nice. Maybe a little bit more contrast down here. It's kind of interesting. A little bit more contrast up here. Too much. That's good. So a beautiful contrast of light and dark with orange. Let's go into saturation. So here we have a much more complex grid, 7 units. And you can see how, as I'm using grids with more units in them, the compositions become more complex. Again, I'm going to make a blend this time. And in this case, I'll blend it to gray. So on one side of the composition, I'll have the pure hue. And in this case, let's just try purple, see what happens. Go back to my swatches, drag the purple down. Now on the other side, I'm going to create a gray. And I think what I need to do here is actually create a new swatch that's actually gray. Just call this gray. And working in RGB, so gray is going to be the mixture, and I'm just going to go to the middle. Something like that. That's one way of doing it. I just made my entire gradient that color. It's not what I wanted to do. All right, so bring this down here. Okay, so now I have a blend at the bottom that runs from purple on one side to gray on the other with some beautiful chromatics in the middle. And I think I'm just going to lighten up this gray just a little bit. Turn that on and just lighten up this gray just a little bit. That's better. And same thing. Since I have a 7x7 grid and I have a true center, I'll go back and sample from the blend. In this case, go back to a symmetrical composition. And you can see what's happening here. So I'm just playing with saturation. I think I want these outside squares here, 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 and here to be perfectly gray. If you're into patterning, this is so fun. So much interesting. It can be very systematic. Sometimes you lose track. Again, sampling from the blend. And then finally this ring right here. And I can decide what I want this to be. Again, this is just pure experimentation. There we go. And there was just that one that I missed right here. And I know that that is just like this one over here. And again, I'm going to turn off the white lines. Yeah, beautiful contrast to saturation. So the vivid colors are very identifiable. The grays in the corners, these L shapes, which are slightly chromatic grays, very beautiful. We'll go on to complementary contrast. Here I'll use this grid. It has many more modules, but it should be fun. So in this case, again, I'm going to make a gradient blend. And here, I'm going to choose two complementary colors. The outline, go to this. So on one side, I'll have one of the complements, and on the other side, I'll have the other. So let's just say red and green, just see what happens. Actually, let's go with orange and blue. Orange on one side, and blue on the other. Just see what we get. Actually pretty good. So as I was saying before, the true test of complementary colors is whether or not the center mixture, the middle mixture, is a real gray, an honest gray. Is a chromatic gray. Now this gray is slightly chromatic, although it's pretty neutral. You can see that right there. It's kind of nice. So I'll just continue populating and see what happens. I think on this one, I will, again, work a little bit more asymmetrically and try to create a strong focal point in one part of the composition. So I'm going to take this back to black. That's straight back to black. Okay. So I'm thinking that the focal point should be in the upper right-hand corner, someplace up in this area. I'll start here, and I'm going to put one of the more vibrant colors there. Sample from the orange down here. And just build around it with a few other variants of the orange various degrees of saturation. And we'll kind of build out from there. There's my most neutral gray. It's kind of interesting. I always want to make sure I'm getting the right area selected. Yeah, I kind of like that. Strong focal point right here. Just let me get rid of the white outlines. Yeah, very nice. Strong hierarchy right there. It's really beautiful blues over here.